I spent nearly 2 years working on my dream game and ended up making the biggest mistakes I've ever made as an indie game developer. But I've also learned 3 very important lessons to avoid these mistakes that I'll be taking into my next project, and I want to share them with you so that you don't end up wasting your time too. If you've seen other videos like this before, you're probably thinking of a phrase that gets repeated over and over again, which is scope creep. Scope is a factor for sure, but I think the idea of scope creep is both overblown and inaccurate to what actually happens. It's definitely not quite what happened in my case. The real problem is a little bit more complicated, so let me explain. Imagine you're trying to buy a car and the one thing that you really want for some reason is for your car to be red and to have leather seats. One day some guy shows up and says, hey, I have just the car for you, it has leather seats and it's red. But when you go to check it out, it's just a homemade cart that barely holds together. The guy turns around and says, look, I know it's a little bit rough around the edges, but I'm just one guy. It's pretty impressive that I even managed to make this. What would you tell him? Obviously, you'd say, no, this is absolutely not what I wanted. I want a car that actually works. In my case, the leather seats thing was trying to adopt the design philosophy of old RPGs like Morrowind that you don't really see in today's games anymore. The thing is, if classic RPG fans wanted a game similar to Morrowind, they would just play Morrowind, and telling them, look, this was just made by one guy certainly wouldn't convince them. If your game sucks, being a solo indie dev isn't a feature, it's an excuse. So the first problem wasn't making a game that spun out of control or was too big for me to build. I could build it. I made a ton of progress, and in a matter of months, every feature would be in the game. The problem isn't that I wouldn't be able to build the game, it's that I wouldn't have been able to build the game at a sufficiently high quality to be commercially viable. Time isn't the only thing that made this so difficult. If I had all the time in the world, I could probably make the game good. The thing is, in my situation, I need to start making money off my games to sustain my business. I didn't start this game to maximize profit, I started it mostly for fun because I had a full-time job at the time. Now that things are serious, the game I've ended up with is going to be really hard to sell. And I don't think I'm alone in this. Why does this sort of thing keep happening? Why can't we aspiring indie devs just make simple games? Why do we feel this need to build massive open world RPGs, and why do we flinch when people say we should build smaller games? In my case, I genuinely thought that this is what I wanted to do. I had so many ideas. There wasn't one thing I loved about it. I loved all of it. The thing is, as strong as that passion and drive may be, the truth is that it does not last forever. And it's a lot easier to predict how much time you'll need to make the game compared to how long your motivation will last, and the two almost never align. On the flip side, I don't think I'd be alone in saying that if I knew my game would make good money, I'd keep working on it as is. But that was not the case. I couldn't spend another year or two building dungeons and quests. The game was just not worth it. But how do you even know whether or not it is when you start making your game? The answer, it turns out, is actually super simple. Over the past few months, I've learned that there are essentially 2 main factors that determine whether or not a game is going to be profitable. Let's take some imaginary games and put them on a chart. Down here, it'll show how long the games will take to make, and over here, it shows how much money they end up making. Let's say someone makes a game in a month and it makes $1,000. Let's say another game takes 5 years to make and it makes $10 million. Now let's say a game is made in just 1 year and it makes $50,000. Let's add another game that was made in 3 months and it made $20,000. Which of these is the most profitable? Well, obviously the 5-year game, but putting in that much time is an absurd risk. And statistically, most of these games, the ones that you just never hear about, totally flop. Okay, so what about the 1-year game? Well, 50,000 is a great revenue, but obviously the game that earns the most per month is the 3-month game. If you make 4 3-month games and each earn $20,000, you end up earning $80,000. There are 2 really important objections here, but before I address them, using everything I've learned from making all these mistakes over the years, I put together something I wish I had when I started that I think you'll find super useful, which is a brand new free guide to getting your first Steam game done. It'll show you how to create a game design outline and development schedule to help you actually launch your game. If, like me, your time is super limited but you want to become a game developer, you can grab that guide in the description. The first objection to making shorter games is probably what you were thinking of at first, which is, I don't want to make 3-month games. I don't care about silly little gimmicky games. I want to realize my vision. And don't let anyone tell you that that's silly. It's great that you are so driven to create a deeply meaningful experience. I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here. Please bear with me, and I'm quite convinced that this is true for 90% of us. You actually do want to make small games, and I can prove it. Let's be honest, you and I both have who knows how many unfinished games sitting around collecting digital dust. Remember how passionate you were about FPS Project Idea Prototype Test in 2016? I remember. This cycle of endlessly unfinished projects just leaves us depressed. Ideas like this come and go, and that's okay, but I think what you and I are actually trying to do is much more fundamental, and it has to do with the way our brains are wired. Whenever you abandon a project, your brain picks up on that, and the more you do it, the more you recognize it as a pattern. Eventually, your brain decides, I guess we just don't have what it takes to finish games. But if you've ever done a game jam, or even something as simple as cooked dinner, or cleaned your room, or mowed the lawn, you'll have a very different feeling. A feeling of satisfaction or happiness, no matter how trivial or small, for accomplishing something, for putting in the effort needed to get something done. Now imagine if instead of a pattern of failure, your brain was being fed by a pattern of successfully completed games that you were proud of. Ultimately, the older I get, the more I realize that it doesn't really matter to me whether or not I build my perfect masterpiece game idea. I'm more and more excited about learning how to make a high quality game that I can actually finish, that will reward me with a reasonable amount of revenue for my hard work. Don't think that this is selling out. It's finding joy in the humility of knowing you can make a much better game if you thrive within the limited hand you were dealt with. That's what I believe now anyway. Let me know if you think it makes sense. The second objection is one that requires a bit more careful attention, which is, okay, say you spend 3 months on a game and launch it. Who's to say that that game also won't make enough money to even buy groceries or pay rent? Okay, so this ties in directly to understanding what makes a game appealing and why people buy games in the first place. Like I said before, if people wanted to play Morrowind, they would just play Morrowind. You probably think I'm going to say we need a hook to stand out or something, but that's not necessarily true. You do need to stand out in some way, but personally I'm not that interested in gimmicky hooks, so I'd much rather follow Jonas Tyroller's suggestion and stand out by being the best. So if you create a better Morrowind than Morrowind, yeah, people will want to play it, but these games are made in a team over years. There's no way we can compete. This is the other reason we're supposed to make small games, because there's something in our game idea that drives our passion, and if we can find it, we can be the best at that one thing. So if you can find the thing that you can be the best at, and it's the sort of thing that you can make in a very short time, you have a successful game dev formula. Notice that this is the exact opposite of what I did with my game. So what am I going to do now? Well, I have to get this game done. I've already simplified it down to maybe 5% of what it was originally going to be. I'm just going to treat it like practice. More importantly, I have a new game idea that brings in everything I've learned this year about making profitable games that I'll be talking about soon. So please subscribe if you want to hear more about that, and make sure you get your free game design and scheduling guide below. And if you feel like you're getting closer to losing motivation with your game, watch this video next, because in it I go over more tips to make sure that you get your game done. Thanks for watching, and God bless.